Okay, welcome to the March 23rd, 2020 meeting of the Stillwater City Council. This meeting is historic in a couple of different ways. It's our first regular meeting, which will be conducted via web conferencing using the Zoom platform. So hopefully everyone out there can see us and hear us, and we're going to move forward with this platform for the foreseeable future. So at this point, I will call this meeting to order. I am here in the room with just a couple other folks that are all spread out. The rest of our counselors are tuning in via video conference. I think you guys are all unmuted and able to speak as we go forward. We'll do votes by roll call instead of by our normal push button system. So we'll go ahead and get started on the agenda here tonight. First up, we have a consent docket item, which is a budget amendment reflecting an increase so far this year, at least, in our use tax collections above budget. And so the budget amendment is to reflect the additional use taxes that we've collected in the budget so far this year. So, councilors, any questions, comments, or motion on the consent docket?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Wedlake and a second from Vice Mayor Darlington. Teresa, will you call the roll?
Mayor Joy?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jalowski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. We don't have anyone signed up for this format of public hearing for public items tonight. So we will, in meeting formats, you do have the opportunity to sign up to speak, just like you do at our normal meetings. So going forward, if you do have comments on the items we're addressing, you can do that online. But tonight we don't have anyone signed up. So that will take us down to item 5 under general orders. Item A is discuss proposed operating budget for the fiscal year 2021. Norman McNichol is going to take that item. Do you want me to go ahead and put your slide up, Norman?
Not quite yet, Mayor, but momentarily, if you would. The intent of this meeting originally was to be a study session about the 2011 budget and, excuse me, the 2021 budget. And this got changed to a regular meeting of the council because of some other business that we had to do. The budget that you have received in your packet was formulated and completed on the Wednesday before all of the information about COVID-19 broke. Since that time, we have, and you have before you in your packet, a balanced budget. But since that time, we have been looking at the potential impact of the city on revenue for 2021, and it's not a great picture. And I would also point out to you that if you would put up that slide now, the high water mark for the city of Stillwater for combined sales tax and use tax was in 2014. And we just this year in our projected revenue would beat that by $200,000. However, one of the issues that we were going to tell you and still exists when we brought you this budget is that the city's purchasing power has been decreasing significantly over the last 6 years. That $200,000 increase would be welcome, but according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index, today's prices in 2020 are 9.27 higher than the average prices since 2014. The US dollar experienced an average inflation rate of 1.49% per year during this period, meaning the real value of a dollar decreased. In other words, as shown in this table, $30,726,171 in 2014 is an equivalent purchasing power today of $33,574,042 and change. It's a difference of almost $3 million over that 6 years. That's the information that you would have received, and Christy will give you information on what we came up in the 2021 budget here in a few minutes. However, the events of the last couple of weeks have certainly changed the entire picture of what we see in the future. And one of the issues with that is that there is no real way to predict what's going to happen to the revenue of the city of Stillwater. But from just a practical aspect, I can say to you that if we lose half of our population in the next couple of weeks, and
by lose half our population, you mean people that aren't here because students are gone?
Yes, people that aren't here because students are gone. They've moved away. And another of that remaining roughly 25,000 people, another third or more are telecommuting. And because of the decrease in what we hope is travel around the city, we see our sales tax numbers being significantly reduced, anywhere from up to half to 2/3. Also, later in the SUA agenda, if you pass a resolution that we have suggested to you that gives grace to people that have lost their jobs and can't pay their utility bills, that will be another factor that affects the coming year's budget. So in effect, the 2021 budget that we're presenting tonight is a placeholder as required by state law. And the best that we can give you right now is that it will be roughly June before we can say to you, we think we have numbers. That's assuming that we can get back to normal business in August. The other thing that I would say to you is that the purchasing that has been going on lately, the run on the stores, excessive buying, and at least what I've observed of food, stuffs, paper products, that kind of thing will give us an initial boost. But at some point in time, those things are going to have to be used or they're going to become unusable. And the unfortunate thing is that those that are participating in that kind of behavior are perpetuating the short-term shortage. If people would just buy what they need, take it home and use it, and then go back to the store again in a week, those supply chains could catch up. There has been a lot of things that have happened in the United States recently to help improve those supply chains in terms of trucking companies getting reduced regulation, increased amount of drive time, all kinds of things that have happened. But if we don't stop hoarding, we're not going to get. So I'm going to let Christy talk here in a moment about the 2021 budget. I don't know that there needs to be a lot of discussion about it because it's pretty unrealistic. I am proud of the employees that put a lot of hard work into presenting you a balanced budget for 2021. And I don't want to sound like the sayer of doom. Hopefully, we will get through this. We have sufficient reserves to weather the storm, but that will be painful because we have to think about not only COVID-19 that we're currently in, but the possibility of severe weather and other issues. And we'll have to pretty quickly replenish those reserves. So if that, with that, if you have any questions, be glad to try to answer them.
Counselors, any questions for Norman at this point before we hear from Christy?
No.
Okay. Let's see, Christy, you are not muted. There you are on the screen.
Can you hear me?
Yep. You want me to put up your PowerPoint?
I've actually got it on my screen here.
Okay.
So give me just a minute and I'll share that. Okay, can you see my presentation there?
Yep, we can.
Yes.
Okay, great. And like Norman said, you know, this presentation doesn't include any of that COVID-19 impact. I think some of it's still relevant. It's still a good springboard for us once we have more information, and staff is evaluating the situation and trying to come up with some what if scenarios and then some options for us depending on what happens over the next few months. So I just want to reassure you that we are looking at that and trying to come up with alternate plans for the different scenarios. A couple of other things before I jump into the presentation. Number one is typically we would ask all of our department heads to be present at this meeting so that when you ask questions that might be specific to a department, we could have them step in and help answer those questions. Of course, they are not here with us tonight, but I don't want that to hold back any of your questions. Please ask those if you need to or want to, and we just may have to follow up later this week with those answers. And finally, I do want to acknowledge one of my staff members, Leah Berry. She is our budget specialist and has done a tremendous amount of work in pulling together this balanced budget and this presentation that we're going to go through. And normally she would be joining me and helping me with this, but she is watching from home this evening. Oh, hang on just a moment. Okay, here we go. So here's our strategic priorities, and this is just a reminder that these are the priorities adopted by our council, and this is what provides city staff with a roadmap and a guidebook as we identify the priorities that should be funded through the city's budget. And then here is our budget cycle. Again, this is a continuous cycle. We've talked about this many times as far as constantly getting our citizens' input and feedback to incorporate into our budget and our planning throughout the year. City staff is also constantly monitoring the budget to evaluate the need for modification, and we'll continue that, especially through this COVID-19 incident. Then those modifications are, of course, brought to the council for action. We are coming to a close on phase 1 of our budget cycle, which is budget preparation, and hopefully moving into a budget approval phase. So before I jump into the numbers, a couple of disclaimers here. One, this is going to be a very high-level presentation, concentrating more on the major funds and fund types. The details by fund and also by department were provided as part of the agenda packet. Also, in this presentation this evening, we have excluded all of the transfers between funds. So we're only looking at total dollars coming into the city and total dollars leaving the city. So we want to look at revenues first because our revenue projections do determine our spending constraints. Our revenues in this case and in this proposed budget are relatively flat compared to FY20. The major difference being a $900,000 increase in use tax revenue. Here is that same total revenues, but here it's depicted graphically by revenue source. This gives us an idea of what our major revenue sources across the city. And I will also go back and state that all the numbers here are comprehensive of the entire organization. So there's nothing excluded from any of the numbers that are presented here. It's all inclusive. But our major revenue source is our electric revenues, representing 43% of total revenues. That's followed by our sales and use tax at 26%. And so if we are looking at a possible significant downturn in our sales and use tax collections, you can see how that would have a significant impact to our organization over the next several months. Behind sales and use tax is our water revenues at 12%, followed by other revenues at 9%. And the other revenues are going to include other kinds of taxes, franchise fees, income, interest income, and then numerous types of charges for services. And then we round out our revenues with wastewater at 6% and waste management at 4% of total revenues. Looking at expenditures, our expenditures in total are somewhat flat, with a couple of major differences that are pretty evident on this slide. One of those is a decrease in our city capital fund expenditures. That's a decrease of $1.6 million as compared to the FY20 adopted budget. The other major difference here is a decrease in purchase power costs, and this is a decrease of $4.9 million. And on the SUA trustee meeting later this evening, you have a similar budget amendment to reduce our purchase power costs for the current year. And this all stems from some changes. Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry. Can we, we've had a couple people ask if you can speak up a little.
Oh, absolutely.
Can't get the audio turned up on my end, but if you could speak a little louder, that would be helpful.
Yes, yes. Thank you. So I was just stating that we will have a budget amendment on our SUA meeting later this evening to decrease our purchase power in the current fiscal year, similar to what we're seeing in the decrease next year. And that all relates to some changes that are coming from the Grand River Dam Authority. And those changes being the use of more hydro in their power generation, the decrease in natural gas costs, and also passing on a new rate structure to us. All of the combination of all of those three things is playing to our favor when it comes to our purchase power costs. There's a few other differences in expenditures that I'll talk about just a little bit later. Is that better as far as sound?
Yes.
Okay. And here is our expenditures by category. So our largest expenditure category is going to be our personnel costs, and those represent 45% of our entire expenditures. That's followed by our purchase power costs at 22% of expenditures. And then services and fees at 16%, debt service at 8%, and then materials and supplies and capital outlay at 6% and 3% respectively. So the significant changes from FY20 to FY21, we've talked about a few of these already. The first three bullet points we've already discussed. There's also an increase in health insurance costs in our expenditure budget, and that increase is $1 million. We've also just got some information from our third-party administrator that tells us that increase may need to be even greater than $1 million. We just got those numbers, so we're trying to work through that right now to really determine that impact. We also have an increase in payroll costs of $1.2 million. Since our personnel costs really are our largest expenditure category, I thought I would talk just a little bit about that and those changes. The changes from the FY20 adopted budget to the FY21 proposed is an increase of 19 positions, bringing us to a total position count of 636. Of that 636 positions, 538 of those are full-time employees. 54 are part-time employees, and then we have 44 unfilled positions right now. So those 44 unfilled positions represent about $2 million in budget appropriations that are attached to those positions. And on the next two slides are just the actual breakdown of position changes by department. And I won't necessarily read through all of this, as I do plan to make this, this PowerPoint presentation available on our website after this meeting. But I've just summarized that here by department. I'll give you just a moment to look at that. And then we have talked a lot about reserves, and Norman even talked about it earlier this evening. I do want to reassure you that our reserve targets that have been identified are fully funded in the proposed FY21 budget, with the exception of the airport fund reserve. And that's just because there is not yet a funding source identified to start building up that reserve. The general fund reserve target is $9 million, and that is funded in two ways. One, through a $1 million minimum reserve that we keep in the self-insurance fund, as well as an old defined benefit retiree plan. And that plan only has one retiree left on it, but it will be kept open until that individual falls off the plan, or we make other arrangements to close out that plan. And then, as you can see, the SUA reserve targets are also noted here. And in FY19, we established the City Capital Fund as a way to track and prioritize our ongoing capital investment. And so this is a list of projects that's proposed to be funded in the FY21 budget. A few of those I'll highlight: the final phase of the master drainage plan, design phase of the Duck Street overlay project between 6th and Boomer. We're setting aside some funds for future transportation projects. We have storm siren upgrades, and then several other upgrades and replacements of equipment in several departments. So I want to highlight some things that are not included in the budget, just to clarify this, because you've heard some reports recently by the Recycling Task Force, and also a report on the cost of service for utilities. So the recycling staging facility is not included in the budget at all, and neither is any rate adjustment that would be related to building that facility. Also, the water and wastewater rate adjustments that were discussed during that cost of service presentation are also not included in the proposed budget. And staff kind of talked through this, and we just decided that since these two funds are standalone and self-sustaining funds, and neither participate in the transfer to the general fund, that really that conversation could be had separately and independent of the budget adoption process, because the effects of those rate increases, if we implement that, would affect only those funds. And then there are $12.6 million of city capital requests that the departments have made for FY21 that were also not funded. So just kind of where we go from here, staff will work on incorporating any feedback that the council has for the budget process. Of course, we're going to continue to evaluate the effect of COVID-19 and make adjustments there that we know that we can make or should make. Other than that, right now we have a public hearing scheduled for April 20th, and then budget adoption is scheduled for May 18th. Is there any questions that I can answer?
Counselors, any questions for Christy?
Christy, I just have a question to maybe clarify for the public. If there does seem to be a show that the budget will definitely need to be adjusted because of this COVID-19, are there areas that we immediately look at to cut, or what is that process that you look at first of what needs to be?
Well, we have started, staff has started internally kind of brainstorming the options, because I think we have a lot of options, and I don't know that we know yet where we would target, and I know that you all will each play a critical role in that process as far as which direction we go. I think what's best for staff to do right now is to come up with those options, so that we can have that open conversation with you, to kind of work through that and what the best track forward is.
Sure. Well, and I know that's not a question you can easily answer. I just thought, kind of give us an idea of what we'll need to expect if we do have to look at budget in a different way.
Right. And what I'm looking at is I've I'm looking at whether or not this is a more of a short-term situation, which we won't know for some time. You know, is it something that we could recover from over the course of 12 to 24 months? Or is this something that we're going to look at having to recover from over the next 5 years? Or is it something that we're going to have to recover from even longer than that? So depending on where we land and what happens over the next few weeks or maybe months is really going to determine which track we take and what our options probably are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, counselors?
No, it just does definitely make a case for the difficulty of working on a sales tax basis,
Yeah,
revenue basis.
that's absolutely true. Christy, so, you know, as we go forward here, how long will it be before we see, you know, I know our sales tax collections lag behind the actual date they're collected, right? So
Yes.
start to see, you know, we probably will see, when will we see today's sales tax number?
So there's a 2-month lag. So it's probably, I would anticipate we wouldn't see any real effects probably until June. You know, because we're kind of in this all happened in the middle of March. You know, we do have some hoarding like we've talked about. I don't know that March is going to be very reflective of what we might continue to see. So I really think it's probably going to be June before we really get a feel for the hit that we're going to take.
So April's sales tax collections would be the month.
Yeah, we'll see a little bit of it, you know, with the March, but it'll be mostly April, I think.
So that would suggest that we would get through the fiscal year 2020 budget without sort of seeing the strong effects of this, or get close to being through the 2020 budget.
I would say there's a good chance of that, but I think any steps that we can take, even on a smaller scale, would just be beneficial in the long run. And we've already started reining in spending with the departments and bouncing around ideas on, you know, what just our employees can do on a daily basis, even as small as remembering to flip off the light, because we still have to pay our utility bills ourselves. So if we can conserve that energy, you know, we're looking at all kinds of options that can be implemented immediately.
And then at some point, if we're starting to see that revenue not meeting those budget projections, we're going to have to make choices around whether we reduce spending further, cancel certain projects, or whether we pull money from reserves to kind of keep those things going where they are, right? I mean, that's
that's exactly right. Yes.
Okay.
Well, and that raises an interesting question there in and of itself, and that should we be looking at preparing 2 separate budgets? I mean, a worst case scenario budget, and then, you know, a budget where we're not quite as affected, but it may not be a bad idea to start preparing a doomsday budget, so to speak, so that hopefully it doesn't, but if that eventuality comes to pass, then we're not kind of playing catch up.
Yes, and that's some of the scenarios that we're working on putting together. We can only adopt one budget, but we don't actually have to adopt a budget in May. We could wait a little bit longer. It's been our practice the last few years to adopt very early. We could reevaluate that.
Yeah, because I mean the timeline for us unfortunately is not on our side, because if we're going to get the tax revenue numbers for April in June and our budget's due July 1st, that's not a whole lot of time to readjust or backpedal. So
yeah, and I don't think we would actually have time to wait until we got the June numbers to adopt the budget, just because of the timeline by statute that we have to follow. But we could at least maybe see the March numbers before we took action.
yeah. Okay.
Norman?
Mayor, I'm not suggesting that we would not be working on a revised budget during the interim between now and June 30th. But what you may end up doing is passing this budget as a placeholder while we modify things as we go, because I'm not sure that we'll have an absolutely clear picture even in June, which would be probably the first, maybe the second week of June before we could really start digesting those numbers.
Right.
And we have to have one on file with the state by the 20th, I believe, of June of this year. So it may be that we have a placeholder budget while we're working on modifying what we have to do.
Yeah, because we can do an amended budget at any time, at any business meeting.
Yeah, and that, given the way this process works and the fact that we are smack dab in the middle of trying to put together a very complicated budget document, and this whole thing goes sideways, it certainly makes sense to kind of go forward saying, well, we know this probably isn't going to be what we end up having to work from, but we do need to get one in place. And as long as we all understand that those adjustments are going to end up being made, then we do that as we have to. Further questions for Christy? Christy, did you have anything else?
I do not.
Hold on just a second.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The other thing I would suggest to you is that when we start to get any kind of a picture, we certainly could start with study sessions to discuss future budgets.
I'm going to double check with our technical staff here real quick and make sure we're tracking correctly. Everything good? Okay. This meeting format is quite a new thing, so we appreciate everyone's patience as we get this going. I would just throw in here a thanks to the state legislature and to Governor Stitt for getting that new Open Meeting Act stuff passed fairly quickly so that we can do this remotely. But I don't, and a huge thank you to our IT staff for the work that they put in. Okay, so that will take us down to item 5B on the agenda, which is the status of our fiscal year 2021 strategic plan. Mr. McNichol.
You have a memo before you that indicates that, well, that states that we have a draft plan, and that was in process. And then we contracted with the Studer Group to go coaching. One of the things that they do during that coaching process is help us develop a new strategic plan. So it is our goal, and frankly, with the current situation, I'm not sure that we will be able to meet that goal, but it is our goal to try to bring you a completed strategic plan at the time that we bring you the budget for final adoption. That, I mean, just honestly, that's going to be a push, particularly with half of our employees out every other week. So information and say that we are working on it, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you, Norman. Councilors, any questions for Norman about the strategic plan? I mean, I know we approved moving forward with the Studer Group to help out with some of that coaching and planning, so certainly that delay seems reasonable. And of course, given the present status of our world, certain delays are going to be inevitable, attributable to that. So certainly appreciate the continued work there. Councilors, any other comments on that item?
No.
Okay, that will take us to item 5C, which is discuss the City of Stillwater response to the COVID-19 virus. We had our special meeting a couple days ago, or a few days ago what was that, Thursday night last week, Wednesday night last week?
Wednesday.
The days are running together. We have, I think, the most recent information we have on the status of the virus here locally. I think at that time we were still at 1 confirmed case within Payne County. Tonight we're at 3 confirmed cases in Payne County. Our information, so the health department today released a statement that basically says community spread is present in Oklahoma and has been, as far as we can tell. They are not providing additional information to us about cases and where those cases were acquired. They haven't from the beginning provided us any information other than the county in which that person resides. To the best of our knowledge at this point, the newest case in Payne County is a resident of Stillwater. I think based on the, certainly based on what we're getting from the public health department, we are to assume that there is community spread throughout the state, including within our community. And that Stillwater, you know, as we've been saying for a couple of days now, or at least a week or so, that we need to govern ourselves and make our decisions based on the fact that we assume that to be the case, given that the lag in testing. So this isn't, I guess, a surprise necessarily to anyone that we have local cases and that we have evidence of local community spread, but it is certainly concerning, and will require us to continue certainly our current social distancing or physical distancing guidelines, and potentially will, and also expand those in some way. Before we get to sort of talking about what those additional responses might be, I know several of the counselors have been working in different areas since we talked last week around childcare potentially for hospital workers and first responders. I know Counselor Jaloski, you've been working with Spanish translations on some of our announcements. Vice Mayor Darlington's been working with nonprofits and talking to folks about the potential funding or ways we might be able to help people who are currently you know, being significantly economically impacted by this. I don't, counselors, if you want to, maybe starting Vice Mayor, if you want to comment a little bit on sort of where you are and what you've seen in the community and their response.
Certainly, there are a number of organizations that have been right at the front lines. And I would, again, recommend that anyone who would like to offer help or donations or anything, or who needs donations or help, would contact the United Way, Payne County. They have a great website, which they are translating also. And they have everything listed, you know, the things that you would normally think of first, you know, Our Daily Bread, Salvation Army, the Red Cross. And there are directions on their website, United Way, Payne County.org, that are very clear and easy to follow. I did have a note from Grand Lake Mental Health Center today. They are open at both sites, and they will continue to take clients at the intensive outpatient clinic, as well as their clients in their outpatient services. I did talk to the Communities Foundation of Oklahoma, that includes the Stillwater Community Foundation, and they are beginning to develop a Stillwater Community Foundation disaster relief fund that would be a very appropriate place for Stillwater persons to donate money to, and then that will stay in our community, and we'll have more information on that shortly.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Mm-hmm. Amy or Elaine, do you have any updates you want to share on stuff you've been dealing with?
I'll just do a quick shout out for the childcare. We had talked about childcare opportunities or availability for those essential employees of the city, and then hospital employees. And the good news is right now that it doesn't seem like there's a need that continues. There probably will be. And so we have been very excited about the collaboration between childcare centers as well as the YMCA and United Methodist Church that have childcare facilities that if the need arises, they will be able to take that, to take the employees' children. So they will work through us to help get that done. But right now, it doesn't look like there's a need at this point.
So there are options now for healthcare workers, for first responders, if folks are needing that additional childcare while school is out. And so, yeah, if you are one of those folks and you need some assistance, what's the contact the YMCA? Probably the first
I
part.
would probably say, Norman, would it be John McClenny, or do you want to go through me? And I can get into that person.
Actually, with our rotating schedule, it would probably be pretty nice for it to go through you.
Okay, they can contact me.
Thank you, Elaine. Amy or John, any other updates you guys want to provide?
Sure. I'll just quickly update that we've been working with the city staff to make and marketing to make sure that we have the opportunity to get information, all the information that's being published by the city for the COVID-19 information on our website, that it's being translated. We have a translate function on the website right now on that webpage for Spanish, and then we're also working with our Spanish speaking community to make sure that it goes a little above and beyond that as well. Make sure that the translations are good translations and updated. It's over 5% of our community that is Hispanic, that may fall into that Spanish speaking category. So we want to just make sure that our whole community is getting that information. I've also coordinated a little bit with the schools to make sure that all the information regarding their lunches and things like that is going out to families that are speaking. I've talked a little bit with the hospital about their information or ability to translate if needed. It's an issue that I think a lot of our news agencies are also looking into. I spoke with KOSU, and they've been concerned across the country. I think that public radio has been concerned that information isn't going out in Spanish. So we're getting those resources kind of pulled together, and I feel pretty comfortable that at least it's out there. It may not be perfect Spanish, but it's out there.
Thank you very much for your work there. Dr. Wedlake?
Yeah, so I'll just give a quick update to the public about health infrastructure and kind of where we're at as far as Stillwater Medical Center is concerned. So Stillwater Medical Center staff has been working pretty tirelessly to ensure that we are ready for what is possibly going to be a surge event probably in the next 1 to 2 weeks, which is going to strain our healthcare infrastructure here in Stillwater. But all of the possible precautions that can take place are being implemented right now. For example, our ICU can currently serve 7 people. There's a 7-bed ICU. The COVID-19 team at Stillwater Medical Center has looked at expanding our use of ventilators to possibly 2 people at a time if that becomes needed. Elective surgeries, as we talked about on Wednesday, have been postponed for now. The hospital is still doing emergent or what is considered medically necessary procedures, but elective procedures have been put on hold. The hospital is also looking at turning several of the surgical suites into kind of makeshift ICUs in the event that we have more patients than we can house in our current ICU. So there's many things that are going on kind of behind the scenes right now to prepare for what hopefully will not happen. But if it does, we're going to be as prepared as we possibly can be. On the outpatient side, as far as the clinics, Stillwater Medical Center has been looking at implementing a telehealth system. The federal government recently kind of liberalized the requirements for telehealth, and now patients under emergency order of President Trump can receive their outpatient care in the convenience of their own home, which is kind of what we're hoping for right now. If there is somebody that needs to see their doctor, but it is not an emergent thing, then as many patients as we can redirect through our telehealth system is really kind of what we're working for in order to keep our social distancing or physical quarantines as good as we can. So there's a lot of work still going on in that front, but in the next 1 to 2 weeks, as this thing really tends to or will likely ramp up, we're going to be as ready as we possibly can be. So,
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Wedlake. Appreciate the update there. I share your confidence in our hospital staff here in Stillwater. I know they've been preparing and they're ready to go to face what's coming their way. I think, like we said, that given the ramp up in testing, I was very happy to see this weekend that Governor Stitt signed an order that allows Oklahoma State and OU to get involved in testing. We expect that OSU is going to be able to help expand testing capabilities quite a bit. And I know the governor has put some things in place to make sure that we see expanded testing this week. But really all that's going to tell us is what we suspect is the case right now, which is that there are going to be multiple more cases here in our community. And our healthcare workers are going to be working to handle those. So a couple other things. I'm on a call tomorrow with a number of mayors and with the governor to chat about local statewide response. I've been vocal, I suppose, at least on social media and in conversations that I've had with folks, that I really feel like we need a better combined response statewide to this problem. Stillwater, we issued an emergency order starting last Sunday and started trying to put things in place. And I'm not sure we acted quickly enough. I'm sure we didn't, in fact. And so, but we're doing what we can. And I think that my concern right now is that we need consistency across the state. We're seeing patients in our hospital and certainly folks in our community that are still living in communities that haven't adopted really even the lowest level of enforcement around physical distancing and trying to keep people from congregating in areas. And so I'm going to continue to push for that at that call tomorrow, and we'll be pushing for it in that call as well. I really would ask that mayors and city councils and community leaders across the state in places that have not yet instituted the basic CDC recommendation, which is closure of restaurant dining rooms, closure of bars, gyms, places where people congregate in general, that those communities please adopt those safeguards as well, so that we can all work together to try to slow the spread down of COVID-19. Along those lines, given the additional growth we're seeing in Stillwater, I am going to issue tonight, I'll sign tonight an additional emergency order for Stillwater that'll make a few changes to what we've already got in place. One, currently we've got a ban on gatherings of more than 50 people. Current CDC recommendation on that is actually 10. And so our emergency order will be expanded to ban gatherings of more than 10 people. These are social gatherings. This doesn't apply to workplaces necessarily, although workplaces should be instituting social distancing and physical distancing guidelines for sure. Our main concern here are just social groups of people getting together and going to do things. One of the things I'm particularly worried about right now is, as our students return to Stillwater, as I've seen comments on social media and statements about parties and getting together and riding this thing out at a house party, which is a terrible, terrible idea. And I have asked Mr. McNichol to make sure that our police force is enforcing these social gathering bans on house parties and any other sorts of social gatherings that we might say to students who might be thinking about those kinds of gatherings. I implore you to think otherwise. I do not want us to have to send police officers to break those things up. That puts everybody at even more danger. But we will break up house parties in Stillwater, and you will get a fine. I think the current available fine, the max fine that we can place on these on violations of these emergency orders is $560. That's nothing compared to the health and welfare of our residents, and so we urge you to not engage in that kind of behavior here in Stillwater. Additionally, on the amended emergency order, we're going to move to ask beauty parlors, barbershops, health clubs, spas, which sort of already are kind of included in the gyms, but tattoo parlors, massage parlors, to also close down at this time, effective at 5 o'clock tomorrow. We are accepting physical therapy, offices of physical therapy that may also give massages. Those aren't massage parlors. Those would be healthcare sorts of organizations. But we are asking that those organizations, which also carry the risk of close personal contact and multiple people being in contact with each other, we are going to ask that they close at 5 o'clock tomorrow, by 5 o'clock tomorrow. And then on retail, what we're going to ask for our retail stores here in town, and I've actually seen a number of these restrictions already adopted by places in town, but we're going to ask and mandate that retail stores in town adopt rules and regulations and enforce them to ensure that their customers have at least 6 feet of space when they're waiting in line, either outside or inside the store, and that no more than, if they wouldn't allow enough people in the store that would keep them from being able to have 6 feet of space. I know there's a lot of stores in town that are already, either just letting one or a few people in at a time. And so I really appreciate the efforts that people are making. We do want to make sure that folks, while they're standing in line to check out, that there's space between them. I've seen sort of the shopping cart rule, which would be a way to do this, right? We keep a shopping cart between, people while they're standing in line. But we are going to ask our retail establishments to put those rules in place and to enforce them to keep our physical distance at a minimum when people are out at these stores. So that'll be the content of this amended order, those 3 new areas. I've gotten a lot of questions about all of that, by the way, will go into effect at 5 o'clock tomorrow. I've gotten a lot of questions about whether Stillwater is going to adopt a shelter-in-place policy. I'm not there yet. I'm close. I think, one of the reasons, there's a couple reasons why I'm hesitant to adopt that sort of a policy right now. One is, you can walk right outside the city limits of Stillwater and there are 0 restrictions in place. Or minimal restrictions in place on some of these gatherings. And so these restrictions really work best when everyone's adopting at least something similar. And we're still not seeing that happening in communities across the state. And I would really like to see a somewhat closer, cooperation around the state before we start stepping that up, just because I'm not sure how effective it will be if we're not applying a lot of those restrictions community-wide. It's also very difficult to enforce. And I don't want to put us in a situation where we put rules in place that we can't enforce, they're not followed, and then people end up just sort of ignoring them. And so I will say this: if you don't need to be outside your home, please don't leave your home. The only way to effectively slow down and stop the spread of this virus is for us to stop being in contact with each other when we don't need to be. If you can stay home, please do. Do not go grocery shopping every day. Go get the groceries you need for the next few days. Stay home for a week. Go back out and shop. All of these sort of social distancing rules and physical distancing rules we've been putting in place are designed to get our community to behave in a certain way, and we can't force you to do that. But I am seeing more conversation around the community that these things are recognized as needed, and really until we all decide that they are and decide to really live by them for the foreseeable future, there's not a whole lot more the government can do, right? Until we all choose to do that. And so I am asking, certainly, while we're not putting a shelter-in-place order in place tonight, I would ask that you behave as if such an order were in place. If you can keep yourself out of contact with people, that is preferable. At this time, I don't think there's that's what we're going to be doing. I'll sign that order after the meeting. It'll be effective as of 5 o'clock tomorrow. And we will continue to evaluate. We'll continue to look at what's going on. As Dr. Wedlake was discussing at the hospital, our major concern in Stillwater right now, my main goal with all of these orders is to keep our hospital functioning well and able to see the patients they need to see, and keep that curve flattened so that we don't have a spike that overwhelms and uses more hospital resources than we have. So that's what we're working towards. And please, please, please follow the guidelines. Stay home if you can. Don't go out unless you need to, and minimize your contact with other people so that we can keep this thing from spreading. That's all I have on that item tonight. Counselors, any additional comments you'd like to add?
Mayor, I would mention that you said you don't have to go to the grocery store every day. You really don't have to go to the grocery store at all. And most everyone delivers. And there is that is other people, but there are many, many, many delivery or pickup on the curb options. So there's really very, very few reasons for you to need to go, certainly, grocery shopping into the grocery store.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to say thank you to everyone who has reached out. I think all of us have gotten emails and texts from individuals. I don't think there's a silly or dumb question. I think in this time, I think we all are just needing to feel like we can reach out and get the answers that we need. And I'm proud this council and the city staff are very much a united front and support what Mayor Joyce is saying. And so I think that we want the public to understand and realize that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I kind of want to echo some of the mayor's comments earlier that I hope that some of the surrounding communities, surrounding city councils, mayors are taking note of this because as Mayor Joyce said, the best way until we develop a vaccine to minimize the social impact, the health impact, the economic impact of this virus, of this disease, is to maintain physical distancing, isolation, not going out if you don't need to go out. That is the single most important weapon we have in our arsenal right now. To say that I've been frustrated with some of the responses outside of our municipality to date would be an understatement. I hope there are people taking note of this. The time for the discussion of whether or not this is serious is over. This is serious. And what we do today, right now, will affect what happens in the next 3 or 4 weeks. What happens in the next 1 to 2 weeks is largely a foregone conclusion. And so the earlier that we enact these policies, the earlier that we can get the word across to people that this is a serious thing and that you need to abide by these recommendations of physical distancing, the better off we're all going to be. I've had a lot of emails about the economic impact of this on small business. I can tell you right now that the economic impact of what we're doing is going to be much, much less than if we did not enact these. If our healthcare system gets overrun, the economic impact will be devastating. So I hope that there are people out there taking note of this, because we've crossed past the point of this being serious. We need to enact these things and do it now. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you all.
That was so strongly said. I don't even want to say anything after that. I just wanted to add the last meeting we had, Vice Mayor Darlington mentioned just how important it was to take care of our mental health in these difficult times. And I know in our family, just taking it a day at a time, thinking of it in a week at a time, you can do anything for a day, you can do anything for a week, you can just kind of take it in those bite-sized moments. And I think it's hard, there's so much to think about, the economic impacts of this and the health impacts of this, and it's scary and it's stressful, and there's just so much anxiety. I know we as a council have been feeling that so much, very in tune to that feeling in our community. And I think just taking a second to take those deep breaths and know that you can get through this today, no matter what's been kind of served to you or given to you or dropped in your lap, and just start again tomorrow.
Yep.
I think you may have noticed that everybody is talking about physical distancing rather than social distancing. Physical distancing is crucial, absolutely crucial. Stay in your home, but there is no reason why you cannot be socially connected. And I think this wonderful technology that we have, that we can do a meeting from home. People are having happy hours on Zoom, dinners, all kinds of creative ways to be socially connected. And that our mental health, our emotional health is just as important and no different actually from our physical health. So physical distance and social connection. Stay connected and stay home.
Excellent points. Thank you, guys. All right, we're going to move down to item 6 on the agenda tonight. This is a resolution suspending disconnection of city and SUA provided utility services for non-payment until further notice. We discussed this at our meeting last week. This has been in practice within the utilities here in Stillwater for the last few days, but we need to adopt this formal resolution in order to make that official. Are there questions or comments or a motion on the resolution?
Motion to approve resolution number CC 2020-9.
Second.
We have a motion from Vice Mayor Darlington and a second from Councilor Jaloski. Teresa, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington,
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake,
Yes.
Councilor Jalowski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that resolution is approved. That also takes us to the end of City Council agenda. Are there reports from officers and boards? Mr. Dorman? Mr. McNichol? Councilors?
No.
Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn the City Council meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Zanotti and a second from Councilor Wedlake. Teresa, will you call the roll?
Mayor Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington,
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake,
Yes.
Councilor Jalowski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the Stillwater City Council meeting is now adjourned. That will take us to the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting for March 23rd, 2020. I will at this time call the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting to order. Trustees, on the consent docket, we have budget amendments that were discussed by Christy Cluck earlier. Is there a question or a comment on the consent docket or a motion?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion from Vice Mayor Darlington and a second from Councilor Jalowski. Teresa, will you call the roll?
Chair Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jalowski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. It takes us to item 5, resolution. This is the sister resolution to the council resolution we just passed. This is resolution SUA 20-1, the resolution suspending disconnection of city SUA provided utility services for non-payment until further notice. Is there a motion on this item?
Motion to adopt resolution number SUA 20-1.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion from Trustee Wedlake and a second from Trustee Zanotti. Teresa, will you please call the roll?
Chair Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jalowski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that resolution is adopted. If there are no reports from officers and boards, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn from Vice Chair Darlington and a second from Trustee Zanotti. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jalowski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the Stillwater Utilities meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all for attending our virtual meeting and appreciate all the help in getting this set up. Have a good night.